So back in 2022, when I bought Little Squirt the fire engine, I knew that the frame was good, but I also knew that the subframe and back was pretty rusty, as was the fuel tank. But it's one of those things that I just decided would be best if I didn't pay attention to it until it was a real problem. Well, guess what? Here's the fuel tank underneath the rear, and see that stain? It's a problem now. The fuel tank has a pinhole leak in it, not enough to really get any diesel on the ground, but enough that I was fairly concerned. So I decided to bite the bullet and drop the tank, just to take a better look at it and decide what could be done. Well, as I was in the process of dropping the tank, I got a good look at the rear subframe, and let me tell you, bad shape. I started thinking that maybe I could just weld in some patches, and that would be good enough, but the deeper I dug into it, the worse it got. So this is the type of thing that covered the rear subframe. Rust to the point of no steel being left. As a matter of fact, you can see right through here, many parts of the rear subframe were this way, including the main supports. So suddenly, I had a huge project on my hands, but I decided that since I didn't really work on Little Squirt very much last year, this would be an excellent opportunity to brush off my welding skills and build a new one so it was just as good as new. There was only one part that was really recoverable, and that's this part right here. It was mainly just surfaced rust, and that's good because this part is big and heavy and very custom built, not something I could make again at home. The rest of this metal was pretty standard stock, and it just so happened that one of my family members had a big pile of square tube in the back waiting to be recycled, and they were kind enough to let me take about 200 feet of it to use on this project. Thanks a lot, you know who you are. The rest of the metal I got from Alro Metal Supply, which is a retail metal store near O'Hare Airport here in Chicago. It was a really cool place. I think there might be more than one of them, so if there's one in your city, go check it out. I decided to start with the fuel tank. First, I looked into getting a new fuel tank, and after calling the manufacturer, I found out that a new one was absolutely out of my price range. So I thought, why not a used one? I started searching and found a couple of used tanks for sale, but they were almost the same price as the new ones. Turns out that these tanks are notorious for rusting out quickly, so all of the used ones that are available have already been snapped up, and therefore the price for used ones is also very high. I decided to just repair the tank I already had. I found an adhesive that was specifically made for patching holes in fuel tanks, and I patched over the pinhole as well as a couple of other areas that were rusted pretty severely. The walls of the tank are actually quite thick, and even though there's some pitting, it really wasn't a big deal to just sand it down, prime it, and then paint it again. As I mentioned earlier, the only part that was really salvageable was this A-shaped support, and so I spent a good amount of time grinding off all the surface rust and preparing it for repainting. Here in the paint shop, aka my basement, I'm repainting the A-shaped support as well as the new C-channel pieces, which connect the entire subframe to the frame of the truck itself. Now comes the hard part, which is building out the rest of the subframe to the exact dimensions as the old one. Fortunately, I still had the old one sitting around, and it was in good enough shape that I could use it for reference measurements. Pretty much what you're seeing here is just the beginning of hours of measure, cut, weld, measure, cut, weld. When I was an undergraduate in college, I took an entire semester-long class on welding, and apart from being extremely entertaining, I actually got pretty good at it. Unfortunately, that was almost 20 years ago, and, no pun intended, my skills are a little rusty. Fortunately, this gave me plenty of opportunity to practice and improve. I used a cheap Chinese MIG welder from Amazon. It actually worked really well, considering it was less than $200. The only thing I found funny was the brand name, which could become a very unfortunate word if you were to just add one more letter. In hopes of not putting anyone to sleep, I'm going to skip through a whole bunch of welding and move on to the paint stage. So at this point, I have finished all of the square tube welding, and I have mated the platform to the subframe support structure. I decided to paint it a flat black, Rust-Oleum, of course, and I decided to only use one coat, since most of the metal had been previously painted with at least one or two other coats. I want this new subframe to last as long as humanly possible, so I decided to apply an anti-rust coating on the inside of the square tube. This product sprays out of the can as an aerosol liquid, and then within a few days hardens into a semi-solid wax. It completely coats all of the bare metal and creeps into any areas where my welds may not make a perfect seal. As you can see, it comes with this really long tube, which has a sprayer in the end, and so all you have to do is insert the hose all the way into the square tube as far as you can, start spraying, and then pull it out slowly. There were a few areas where the square tube was completely sealed off from the outside world, so I did have to drill some holes to get the sprayer in, but it's not a big deal since they will be protected by the wax, and I'm also going to insert a plug to cover up the holes. I closed off any open square tubes with these square plastic caps that I found at, where else? Amazon. I'm hoping that between the paint, the wax, and the plugs that I seal out any moisture and keep this subframe sturdy for many, many years to come. I estimated that this entire subframe assembly weighs approximately 350 pounds, so to save my back, I decided to use a pulley system that was originally meant for skinning deer, of all things, to raise and lower the platform so I could work on it from different angles. At this point, the platform is completely finished. Here you see me lowering it for the final time, and, in our stunning conclusion of part 2, we'll finally figure out how the heck do I get this thing back over to the fire truck and lift it back underneath the rear end. If my chiropractor is watching this, he definitely won't want to miss the next episode. See you then!